Hi, everybody. I am Rhiannon Klein, National Director of Advocacy at Community Voices for 340B. And incoming is your guest host today, Lisa. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, Rhiannon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's Friday Junior. I know most people call it Thursday, but I'm raring to go for the end of this week, and we had some interesting announcements that came out this morning on the database. So it'll be interesting to talk about that once we have our advocacy workshop. So really looking forward to our call today. And I miss having Felicity here. But she is doing good work with the community health centers and is on the road. So she entrusted the two of us to carry forward for our normal 340B ladies who lunch and learn. So looking forward to our conversation. I know that I believe we've got some polling that we are going to start with before we get running. So Chelsea, if you don't mind, we can start with our first kind of our welcome. So as we always do, we love to know who's in the room with us today. So there's a poll that you will see in the application that we're in. So for our hospitals, our FQHCs, other types of grantees, are you a contract pharmacy or my favorite 340B friends and family?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what we've got. All right. So our poll results are coming in. About half right now are on the FQHC space, about a third in the hospital space, and the remaining going friends and family. Wonder if there's a plan for that. It's kind of like your cell phone plan.
Some kind of a trauma care plan.
Right. Maybe more like a trauma care plan. I love it. Okay. So my favorite one, and I'd love for you guys to kind of, this one, when we talked about planning for this, I know somebody said no sports shirt today. No sports shirt today. I am not happy that my Houston Astros did not win, but I'm going to root for the Texas Rangers on that baseball thing. But our fun one here, and I want everyone to be as creative as possible with this question because we thought real long and hard about this. Halloween's coming up next week. If you had to pick a costume, what would your 340B inspired Halloween costume be? I almost wore
This is
mine.
a hard one, Lisa. Do you have one?
I don't know.
Twins look at discounts. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Oh, I love it, Lacey. That's the creativity. A scary pharma executive zombie. I love it. Not inspired.
Would be Adam Klein.
But what would you be? Like, what would you dress up as? He does SpongeBob. So perhaps maybe you could be SpongeBob SquarePants. If you've ever seen, he always has a stuffed animal of SpongeBob SquarePants on his desktop with him.
That's
extreme
funny.
couponer, complete with organizer.
A chill pill. A pharma bro. I like the pharma bro.
No, I think the simplistic one, Alexandra, a big question mark, because I'm always confused.
That is a really good one.
Yeah. I might be a triangle, keeping it really simple. Triangles represent change. That is 340B is always changing. A box looking like a manufacturer plant and go a big pharma. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, you guys are a lot more creative than I am.
I love it. I've got some ideas for Tuesday. Yeah. I was just going to go in my traditional. I have a little sweatshirt that I bought. I fly a lot for work, and I've worn it many times on the plane. And it says "frequent flyer," and it's a witch on a broom.
Oh.
Anyway, I like the cake.
That's so
Sue,
great.
you're going off of the 340B wedding cake that Felicity loves to put out there. So I love it. And a brick wall.
Yep.
And that I think is, Rhiannon, the reason why we have you here today is because you can tell by these scary costumes what people are thinking and their frame of mind. And I think you've got some really great things to share with us today on some of the advocacy work. So we'll go ahead and pull up our slide. And I know you have come to this meeting many times, so I don't need to do a formal introduction, but Rhiannon, have done yeoman work on advocating and providing a voice through 340B Community Voices. So as many people know, the acronym CV340B. So I will turn it over to you and we will get ready to kind of dive into what's happening and how we can all provide our voice to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lisa. We're excited to hear from you kind of on the updates at the end of our presentation, see kind of what is going on in the 340B world. I know there's a lot of it. But for this part, we are going to do some advocacy today. And it does feel like 340B is a brick wall, and it does feel scary and a question mark. But there's a lot that we can do in advocacy as it pertains to 340B. Community Voices for 340B, I was so excited to see on the first poll, you know, we've got hospitals and FQHCs and grantees here. CV340B is the only national organization that provides a space for all 340B stakeholders to come together and to defend 340B. If you don't know or you're not a part of one yet, we do have something called regional advocacy groups. We have 5 of these. And they meet once a month. You can come in and come out wherever you feel is necessary for your schedule. You'll get an update on 340B, kind of like Lisa's going to do at the end of our call. And then we'll talk about advocacy in your region. And so if you would like to join one of those, go on cv340b.org and sign up. That's going to be a wonderful way to kind of get all of your 340B information in the meantime between conferences. So before we start, I'm going to close my door because my dog is upset that I put her in her crate.
She's not upset about 340B. I bet that's what it really was.
No, she's just like, Mom, why'd you put me away? I can hear her. So today we're going to do a storytelling workshop. And if you've ever been in a webinar with me, you'll know that I make you work. And because I think that this interaction is really important to understanding how advocacy works. And so you'll find in the handouts a Word document. It is a worksheet, and it will follow along with what we're going to do today. Storytelling is a crucial component of advocacy work because it has the power to educate, engage, and inspire people to take action. Now, storytelling has multiple arenas of usefulness. You can use your storytelling to talk to your policymakers, but also to talk to your staff. And you can use it to talk to your advocates and your patients and your board. And so knowing how to craft a good story, an accurate story, and a story that inspires people is really foundational to being a good 340B advocate. Now we have a poll for you. And I think Chelsea's put that up.
Yeah.
Why is storytelling important to advocacy? What would you say is the most important thing about storytelling?
So many of these look good, Rhiannon.
I know. Pick one. And we'll go with it. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide because all of these are true, right? So storytelling is important to advocacy because it's memorable. So if you tell a story about something, you're going to remember it. It inspires an emotional connection. When you tell a story about yourself or your life or your work, you are then, inviting the person that's listening into your world. It builds trust. It humanizes the issue, which is something that we really need in 340B. It inspires the listener to take action. Again, something else that we need in 340B advocacy. It's persuasive and it engages. So storytelling has lots of different layers to it. But I wanted to take a look at some examples. So these are all news stories that have happened in the last month or two. They are news stories that are quite obviously coming from drug companies, the other side of the 340B aisle. And so some of them, federal drug discount program inadvertently promotes use of costlier drugs. 340B program is increasing Medicare Part B drugs. So you can kind of see a couple of these themes in here. And I wanted to really dissect what story is pharma trying to tell with these news stories that come out. So in the chat, if you will put in, what story do you think that pharma is trying to tell, that drug companies are trying to tell about the 340B program? What is it? What is the message that they're trying to get across? So go ahead and answer in the chat, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Lisa, what do you think?
What the story is?
Yeah, what are they trying to say? 340B is bad, spends too much money.
Well, yeah, I think that's a lot of the storytelling. I think it's also trying to demonstrate that it's grown proportionally, that it's not serving its intended audience. So they're creating that, I guess, the picture of abuse and trying to pull on those emotional strings of our general population, that, oh, the hospitals are maybe not, the good guy, they're more the bad guy, and painting pharma as a, look what we're up against. And then there's some really good ones, I think, in the chat, which, lots of abuse, discrediting the program. These are all great thoughts, and I think they're all, to some extent, part of the strategy.
I think so too. The top three ones that I think I see over and over again, which all of you have hit on, is number one, 340B is being abused. Number two, it costs a lot of money. They leave out the fact that it costs them money, but that's neither here nor there. And then number three is that it's not benefiting patients. So programs being abused, costs a lot of money, not benefiting patients. Pharma drug companies are really great at harping on this message and staying on point over and over and over again. And so what are we trying to say about the 340B program? What do you guys think our three top messages about 340B are or should be? What do you think? 340B saves lives. That's a good one.
There's more out there.
I think, there's so many out there. And I think we hear this a lot. We follow the rules, specific examples on how 340B is helping our patients. Their profit margin still greatly exceeds ours. Patients do benefit. Yep. Patients can close the gaps in care. Yep. These are great ones. And I think I took all of these ideas that you guys are giving and all of these kind of themes that we're all thinking about individually and tried to distill them into three overarching ones. And I want you to tell me what you think about this. Non-taxpayer solution to high drug costs, support for vulnerable communities, and cost saving for the healthcare system. Access to medications. Yep, hospitals can help more people because of 340B. So these are all great ones. And so if we were to take these storytelling themes and continue to harp on them over and over and over and over again, we're going to be able to kind of access that level of storytelling and the united level of storytelling that other people in the market have come from. So in order for us to do that, we all just have to have our own personal stories already and have something to draw from. So that's what we're going to do today. The do's and don'ts of storytelling. We're going to start with some of the don'ts. So when we are crafting our own personal story, we don't want to overload it with details. Nobody cares. We don't want to exaggerate or make the truth seem more than it is, or preach. A lot of times in the 340B world, we will use jargon that maybe our neighbors wouldn't understand. And so we want to stay away from any of those acronyms that people don't understand. We want to stay away from any sort of stakeholder specific words. We want to keep it very, very simple. We don't rely solely on guilt or fear. There is a real aspect of 340B advocacy where if 340B goes away, there's going to be a hole in the safety net. That is a real thing. But we cannot rely solely on that argument to tell our story. And we don't want to ramble. Rambling just kind of looks like extra information that doesn't necessarily support the point. What we do want to do is we want to know our audience. For the story that we're going to write today, your audience is going to be very generic. It's going to be everybody outside of your front doors. And we're going to kind of craft a story that you can take bits and pieces from and use in different audience settings. But what we're going to craft today is kind of your baseline story that will give you a jumping off point. You're going to make it personal. So something that I like to do, especially when I'm reaching out to a policymaker or a policymaker that lives, that is actually from where I'm from, is I'll say, hey, my name is Rhiannon. I live in Mason over across the highway on 127. They have something then to go, I know exactly where that is. You're right next to that other neighborhood that has X, Y, and Z, right? Make it personal. Highlight the impact that 340B is having. So every point that you make in your story, tie it right back to why this is important to 340B and keeping it around. Keep it concise. Again, we don't need the entire history of your organization. We just need, the key facts. Include a call to action. At the end of every good story, there is a part of the story that is going to be the call to action. So for 340B, when we get there, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But for 340B, that's going to be something like, that's why it's important for members of Congress to defend the program. It can be as simple as that. If your organization has actual, your policy wish list, you're more than welcome to put that in there. But it can be as simple as, that's why it's important for Congress to defend 340B. So those are kind of some of our do's and don'ts. And I'm going to stop right here before we start writing our first part of the story to ask if there's any questions before we get going. Impact statements are a great resource. Yep, absolutely. And this is going to really kind of fold in some of those impact statements into a story format so that when you're there, you can tell this story and then you can hand the impact statement to a policymaker.
Yeah, and Rhiannon, one of the things I really enjoy doing, I like practicing storytelling because it's really hard if you don't do it all the time. I always do it while on vacation, which I know sounds really strange, but you talk to strangers, and if a stranger can understand something simplistically, you have met the goal. And I think that's one of the things I hope this group takes away is you do have to practice. Practice on your kids. Tell them what you do at work and why it's important. And using this format, I think everyone's going to have a great opportunity after this webinar to interact and engage and then get out there on the street, so to speak, on foot and start talking to different congressional members and other people in your community. about 340B, which sounds so scary because, like you said, it's complex.
Yeah.
How in the world do you talk to 340B to your next door neighbor? That's how you need to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. And I don't know about you, but I can count, on my hands how many times a year my mother-in-law has to ask me, what is it again that you do? You know? And so those are the little opportunities that you have in everyday life to practice your storytelling, so that you have it down pat. And while 340B is a really complex topic, it's pretty simple when you break it down to its very base parts. 340B is a drug discount given by manufacturers to safety net providers so that safety net providers can then provide more and better services to their patients, right? So you can have that kind of streamlined, simple explanation and then build up on it. So
absolutely.
Let's dive in. If you have your handout, you can follow along. If you just want to kind of listen and then come back and write as we go, that's totally fine too. And at the end, we'll have an arena that you can kind of share your stories, and then we can share them out on social media and things like that. So part one is our who, what, where. So first, we're going to introduce yourself, just like you would introduce yourself in a conversation. Hi, my name is Rhiannon Klein. I'm the National Advocacy Manager for CV340B. We do grassroots advocacy on the 340B drug pricing program, right? So the first one is who. What is the name of your organization? Who are you? And what do you do at the organization? So this is a really easy statement. The name of my organization is Community Voices for 340B. My name is Rhiannon Klein, and I am the National Director for Advocacy. So we're just setting up who you are, your expertise in this program, and what you're about to talk about. So where? Tell the reader about where you're based. Now, this is more like give the reader an idea of where you're based. What's the climate like? What are the people like? I'm based in Lansing, Michigan. It's a Midwestern state with Midwestern people. Everybody's kind and we take care of each other. Super simple sentences, right? So tell them about where the organization is based. What are the people like? What are the patients like? And try and go beyond we serve patients that are 200% below the federal poverty line, right? That doesn't tell us very much about who those patients are. That only tells us about the patient's needs. But who are the patients? Are they church members? Are they community members? Are they business people? Are, things like that. Who are your patients? What are they like? Are they kind? Are they gentle? Are they, those types of descripting words. What services do you provide? The best way to kind of explain the services that you provide is to tell a short story about one of your programs or one of your patients. So if you are a Ryan White clinic and you do primarily HIV care, tell a short story about a patient or a program that you have that has impacted your community. So if you're an FQHC and you have a sprawling diabetes program that's really impacting the community, tell a short story, 1 or 2 sentences. Remember, keep this compact about that program. So who, what, where. These are our first part of our program. That's going to take us to the end of probably our first paragraph here. This is where we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. So the part 2 of this is what happened and what did you do about it? So what happened? How have drug companies' contract pharmacy restrictions or other actions affected your ability to care for your patients in your community? This is going to take maybe 2 or 3 sentences, right? Drug companies have restricted our ability to access contract pharmacies. This has affected our ability to care for our patients because XYZ. That's what we're going to talk about here in this section. You don't have to get super specific. You don't have to say we're closing down a wing. You don't have to say we have to, cut jobs or anything like that if you haven't already done those things. We don't want to cause alarm here in your internal organization. However, it is important for you to lay out, look, these are real effects in our organization and things that have already happened. What did you do about this? So what has your organization had to do to compensate for the loss of revenue or the loss of savings that it has experienced? How has your organization continued to provide care for your patients? Now, that last part's super important, right? What has your organization done to compensate? So many, also the limits on contract pharmacies limits access for patients in rural communities. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to put in the what happened section. How have you compensated for this? Have you had to, I heard a story about an organization that, had to close down their dental wing completely so that they could refocus on serving their other patients. So what happened? What did you do about it? How are you overcoming this obstacle right now? So that's going to be part 2. And then we're going to move on to part 3. Before we do that, let's just hold for a second and see if there's any questions. Okay. So, writing your story, part 3. This is kind of the doldrums part of your story. This is what's stopping you. What in the future would stop your organization from being able to provide affordable care to your patients? So if you're looking into the future, this is another way to say that is what scares you about the future of 340B? What scares your patients about the future of 340B? Explain that, and then talk about what would be the worst outcome if 340B no longer exists in its current form. If 340B got to the point where it was either, too administratively burdensome for you to have it in your organization and for it to be beneficial, or if it were to, shrink to a point where it's really not working for you, any of those things, what are you concerned about in the future? Why are you concerned about it? And what would happen if those things came to fruition? So this is the part of the story where, the hero, the organization, encounters something that they really can't overcome. And they imagine it and they're like, oh my gosh, if this happens, I'm never going to be able to overcome it.
Yeah.
It's the warning. Is
this your kryptonite? Is this the kryptonite to your organization?
What's the kryptonite? Yeah. Yeah. And what's the kryptonite for you as an organization, but also for the safety net at large? I think it's really important to talk about the patient, the organization, and then the safety net at large on all 3 levels, right?
Right.
So then things get a little sunnier. What is your last chance for success? What does your organization want to see happen with the 340B program? This is where we're going to put in that call to action, right? So we're going to talk about my organization wants to see a strong and healthy 340B program that can continue to grow and continue to serve the most vulnerable in our communities. We hope that members of Congress would band together to defend 340B. Something as simple as that. Again, if your organization already has agreed upon, signed off policy notes, you can go ahead and put them right here. A lot of organizations have come up with those in the recent, months, and this is a good place to put those. This is a good place to call out things like your personal member of Congress, the Energy and Commerce. Has your personal member of Congress made any public statements on the 340B program? You could put those in here, positive or negative. You could say, we hope to change Representative X's mind about the 340B program. Or we thank Representative X for their support of the program. And then what's the final outcome? This is your, if we're taking the Superman metaphor, this is your Superman rides off into the sunset, a hero, right? How does your organization see that goal being accomplished? What are the steps that you see that being accomplished? Is it, Congress needs to act now to defend the 340B program? Is it Congress needs to leave the 340B program alone? Is it, we hope to see that the courts have acted soon on the 340B program? Whatever that is for your organization, this is where you put it in a nice little wrapped up conclusion. Restate why you think 340B is worth defending, and then wrap up the end of your story. So this is a 4-part template for you to write your own story, and have all of the pieces that you need to then apply it in several different settings, and to customize it to different audiences. Once you have this written, you'll have tons of different opportunities to use this story. And once you've got it written, you'll realize, oh, now that I have this, everywhere you look, you'll be like, oh, I could use this part of the story there, or I could use this part of the story there. The first thing, of course, that we'll always recommend is that you send it to CV340B at 340B Power Stories. And I will drop that link in the chat. If you send it to us, you can send it to me via email. My email is going to be at the end of the slides. You can put it in our 340B Power Stories. We will put it up on our 340B Power Stories. We'll edit it. We'll throw some pictures in there. Then we'll link you and your organization, and put it up all over social media. So this is a great way to get your story out there really quick. And then, yes, exactly. What's your CE superpowers? How are you like Superman? Because you guys, you're all like a superhero. So other ways that you can use your story, you can use bits and pieces of it on social media as testimony for the 340B program. You can use it in a news release. Your organization can issue a news release. You can use it with policymakers. So again, if you don't have a one-pager template, let us know. You can go onto cv340b.org/resources, and you can create your own one-pager template. If you take this story and the template to your policymakers, you've got a wonderful little advocacy package there. You can use this in a video. So at cv340.com or .org/defend340B videos, you're able to then record a video on the 340B program and the good that it does in your community. And you can use this story that you've already written as your base. So then you already know what you're going to say in the video. You already know what your points are and what you're going to be asking at the end. Op-eds. Op-eds are a great way to get your organization's story out into the mainstream news. So everybody has a local newspaper. They usually have a state or a larger metropolitan newspaper, and then there are the national newspapers. I would say if you're not submitting an op-ed to your local newspaper every month, try this month, try in October. October is a really slow, what I was about to say. October is a really slow news month. And it just really has not been a really slow news month. So I'm just going to take that back. But regardless of whether it's a slow news month or not, submit your op-eds to your local newspaper on a pretty regular basis. Now, talk to your marketing department about this. They'll know how to do this. If you don't have a marketing department, you can take it upon yourself to do this, or you can talk to CV340B. I'm happy to always help you with that. A local news story is another way that you can use this as a template. Again, your organization getting to know your local reporters. Local reporters are much like members of Congress. They're young and they are excited and they want a story. And if you can give them a feel-good story about your organization, they are just going to gobble that up. So go on to Facebook. A lot of times they're on Facebook. They're in like community pages. You'll see them. Does anybody have a story for me? And you can say, I've got a story about my organization. It does this great work. We use this great program. Pitch it to them and see what they say. Newsletters. So many organizations have either an internal newsletter that goes to their staff or an external newsletter that goes to their patients, or both. And this story that you've got a base for is a great platform to talk about the 340B program with your staff or your patients, or both, in a really easy to use template. You've already got the story written out. You can just copy paste it on there. Blogs. We all know blogs are the new newspaper. So if your organization has a blog, ask your IT department, ask your marketing department if you could do a guest blog. Community engagement. Having this story is gonna make it so that you have pre-written talking points to talk at your next community engagement. And so having this story and being able to practice it, like Lisa said, you'll be able to use it in community settings where maybe it wasn't on the schedule that day, but you can say, oh yeah, and 340B XYZ. So these are just a few ways that you can use your story once you have it written. I encourage you, please, we would love to put your story up on our 340B Power Stories page. CV340B is going to renew our efforts to try and capture as many covered entity stakeholder stories as possible and become kind of the go-to repository for these stories, so that we can have one place that reflects all of the good that you all are doing on 340B. So once you've got yours done, please consider submitting it to 340B Power Stories, or my email is on the screen. I'm always happy to hear from you. If you scan that QR code, it will bring up an email message to me. You can just say, hey, Rhiannon, here's my story. And I will get right back to you and we'll get it going. So that is all from me. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them now. If you have questions after, feel free to email me. But I will turn it back over to Lisa so she can give us some updates.
Yeah, thank you, Rhiannon. I love the storytelling aspect, because one of the things, having worked in Washington, D.C. for so many years, it's an art. And the people who can tell their story can really move mountains. And I think having this template, super helpful just to get people to put their thoughts down. Because sometimes the hardest part is, where do you start? Like,
I know.
How do I do an op-ed? And I think this template's really going to be helpful to get people and get them encouraged, brave to tell that story. So I'd love to hear in the chat, how many of you have gone through this process of putting an op-ed together? Was it easy? Was it hard? Is there any learnings that you would like to share with others so that they can learn from the process that you went through? Because I think the hardest part is the first step. And then once you see other people have been able to do it, it'd be really interesting to see who all's had an opportunity to go through this process or something similar in your role that you're in, or a prior role where you did a story. Anyone? Okay. Well, your charge, as I always love to tell people in these things, we all leave in action. So I encourage everyone, pull up that template, download it. It is very simple. And I think you gave us some good tips to think through how to have those conversations. I mean, I was even redrafting my own, and I talk a lot and story tell. And I think it's just another good tool for all of us to think about. So super excited about that. And so we will change tunes here. Oh, somebody put the link to one of their articles. Way to go.
And I am going to jump off stage and let you do your thing.
All right. Thank you. All right. So changing gears, literally what is in the news. So outside of op-eds, we're going to start with just a polling question as we're shifting gears to talk about what's happening in the environment. Would love to hear, have you used the current administrative dispute resolution or the ADR process? Always interested to know about folks that have used this. There are many people who did early on, and it looks like here most have not. And a few of you might want to know a little bit more about it. Well, if we can change the slides, there's some really interesting things happening with the ADR process. So if we all flash back to 2010, that's when the ADR process was officially put into what we would call more of a regulatory format, which is formalized it. HRSA was charged with putting out the ADR, or the administrative dispute resolution, so that covered entities and manufacturers would have a forum where they could go if all of their good faith efforts made, no resolution. This process was there. Well, the ADR, for those of you that have been following it for a while, has gone through many ebbs and flows, meaning HRSA put it out, it had notice and comment period. People were not very happy with the process. Some of them even said, well, HRSA, you told us you were not going to follow through with it and you removed it, but then they posted it. And thus manufacturers had many lawsuits that started in 2020 regarding the ADR process and its validity, and that did HRSA really give the appropriate notice and comment period. And as those lawsuits with manufacturers started to play out, what happened was that HRSA once again went back to the drawing board and put the ADR process out. So I think everyone probably saw in November of last year the proposed ADR that went out, which again was based on a lot of the lawsuits that were happening with the manufacturers. In fact, one of the manufacturers on HRSA's website for some time now, with Eli Lilly, ADR did not apply to them because of the lawsuit where the judge ruled. So now this is HRSA going through the format again to make sure that they dot all of their I's and cross all of their T's. So what came out, I believe, a couple of weeks ago is that it is now going through the final regulatory review process through the administration's office. And when it starts to go through that process, it's called the OMB, the Office of Budget and Management. That process allows the administration to make changes, modify it. It kind of goes up to the chain and then it comes back down the chain to HRSA. And so that is something that we are probably going to see coming out in its more final form. It's always near the holidays, so I would expect that it would be around Thanksgiving. Perhaps we'll have something grateful for. We shall see. But I think that's a process that a lot of folks have been waiting for it to come out so that some of the manufactured challenges that we've been dealing with may possibly be able to go through that. Now, I had said that, but the actual proposed rule that they put out would say, hey, if a manufacturer has a lawsuit or anyone has a lawsuit, they wouldn't go through this process. But we will see, based on the comments that folks were given to HRSA, whether they decided to walk some of that stuff back. But I think the nicer thing of the ADR process is that it did put 340B expertise on the panel, whereas the previous panel was all appointments and not necessarily everyone on the ADR panel had the 340B knowledge or background. So more to come on this. I'm sure when we gather next time, we'll be able to share additional updates on the ADR process. Hot off the press, before I jump on BMS, and you hold that slide, you can keep it on BMS. It gives people a chance to read it. We don't have a slide on the announcement that came out this morning. So fresh off the press, I think like 9:05, my email, I got a note that it was coming out. I had awareness yesterday it might be coming. So it is out officially, and HRSA has now placed on their main website. So if you just go to I put it in the link earlier, but on the main OPA website, the first article on the top says 340B registration requirements for off-site outpatient hospital facilities. So they put out a Federal Register notice. It will officially post tomorrow, but you can read it now. It's completely out there, ready to review. But it basically walks back when we were in the pandemic, we had the emergency status put on where many hospitals were looking at their child sites, which were opening up because of COVID, and they didn't have the opportunity to put them on their Medicare cost report. HRSA had an FAQ. There was a lot of controversy about the FAQ being removed in the May timeframe when the public health emergency ended. This is now their formal stance on how they are looking at those hospital clinics that would be child sites, that they have to be on the Medicare cost report. And they're basically giving everybody a 90-day grace period to become compliant with that. So again, there will be more on this as we kind of go forward. I know a lot of attorneys have looked at the prior FAQs and felt that existing policy really it allowed for it to happen all along. But more to come on this. So I'm sure many of you will read through it and need to apply it to your own hospital child sites to determine what do you need to do now in case you had plans for sites that you maybe did not add. We've already gone through the registration of the recertification process in September. This is going to be an opportunity for folks to really take a look at how does this policy now apply to them. So switching gears, BMS. So I think we've been staying in the land of manufacturer policy restrictions, and BMS has recently changed their policy where historically contract pharmacy restrictions for those non-IMID products only applied to hospitals. Now that has carried over to all covered entity types, including all the grantees. So FQHCs, FQHC lookalikes, now may designate a contract pharmacy for their entity locations that do not have an entity-owned pharmacy on 340B ESP. The other piece of this is, and that's really interesting when you look at the wholly owned pharmacy definition. This is very new, all I think created through these manufacturer restriction policies, is this terminology of being wholly owned versus being a contract pharmacy. So wholly owned pharmacies are no longer now exempt from the contract pharmacy restrictions, and they will only be able to do this if they are designated as a contract pharmacy. Again, if the entity lacks an entity-owned pharmacy. And we've seen a lot of manufacturer policies moving this way this year, in particular because of the court case that came out in January from the Third Circuit. So a lot of people have actually been more recently even calling out the Third Circuit court decision in their more recent letters in the last 2 months. So the IMID products, which the three that are listed here, still are restricted for all covered entities. And I think what was, again, interesting is in the actual 340B ESP, when you sign up for these, there are some statements in the policy that are putting onus on the covered entity regarding audit. And more specifically, there is suggestions that this whole reallocation of accumulations cannot go to others, but more importantly, for some of the covered entities that have used alternate delivery models, again, as a result of the Third Circuit court opinion. Now, this is probably one of the first manufacturers to actually have a statement in their letter that says you cannot redistribute to other pharmacies. Again, I think this is one of those things where they're trying to look at battling this alternate delivery model, which was created through that court case. So everyone is, again, looking at what the court opinions are and applying the 340B law, which is basically make sure you have an eligible patient, you've got purchasing history, you have dispensation history, and then applying this new court opinion that says, hey, covered entities are allowed to deliver those drugs to their eligible patients. While the manufacturer may not be responsible for doing that through the law, nothing prevents that covered entity from doing so. Again, this policy is one of those that I think we're all going to be paying a lot of attention to how this actually does get implemented by BMS, and do they do any good faith inquiries on covered entities that are doing some of those models. Next slide. So polling. So we've had a lot of discussion around advocacy and using your voice. We are very curious if those of you on the call, does your state actually have a law protecting contract pharmacy? And so I'd be really interested to know, yes, because you are in Arkansas or Louisiana, which are the 2 of the 30 now that actually have a contract pharmacy stipulation. Or are you working on one now, or maybe not quite yet, or you're just not sure because maybe your state is sunshine right now, meaning they're not doing any laws because they're on their break, and maybe next year they'll be coming back. So let's see how our results are. Yeah, a lot of folks not right now, and I think some of it may have to do with when your state has when they're open for their state legislature. Like we just got through with Texas as an example, finishing theirs. And so that's going to be very state dependent. Again, honing back on Rhiannon's talk earlier and being able to tell your story, that's a great place where perhaps you can start to gather your storytelling for when you do talk with your state legislators in addition to those federal. So manufacturer responses have been really interesting in this space. I think when we start to take a look at the Arkansas and Louisiana laws specifically, we started to see a slow success rate with manufacturers moving towards unwinding some of their earlier policies as a result of those laws. And you'll see they're all listed here, and it's been an interesting waterfall effect, with one exception with Novo Nordisk. And actually, they went probably quite the opposite way, which is they are fighting fines that have been imposed on them through Arkansas. So Arkansas really made some movements this year with their insurance commissioner, where they finally opened it up and said, we've got, I believe it was 16 covered entity complaints that have been filed. Therefore, we are moving forward on acting upon the law. So again, it'll be interesting to see how the courts look at Novo Nordisk in particular and what direction that goes. But I think the momentum, when you think about how legislation works and the crafting of it, a lot of it does start at the local level, at the state level. And so as these state policies become more successful, I think we will start to see a trend at the federal level that says, hey, there's enough momentum and enough agreement across multiple states that a federal law could eventually become more of a reality. And I will say we are in an odd year, literally and figuratively. But when you're in an odd year before a presidential election, a lot of the congressional movement slows down. So I don't think we expect to see from a federal level any action in this. Maybe the beginnings of having the conversations and drafting legislation, but as far as it passing is not going to be something we are going to see, at least in the 118th Congress. Perhaps next year into 2025, once we have the elections and we have a lot more stability in some of the committees, I think that's when you'll start to see further attention on the contract pharmacy issue. All right, next slide. So we have about 6 minutes left, and I want to make sure we leave in action on our next Ladies Who Lunch and Learn. The topic in November, I think a favorite for many people, is self-auditing. And Lakita Ellis is going to be presenting in November. And December, 340B Prime Vendor is invited. And so we've got 3 speakers that will be coming from the Prime Vendor to talk more about what are those resources and services. And I have a feeling they're going to talk a lot about their Medicaid resource, which they've done a lot of work on here more recently, of just keeping that managed and updated so that those of us in the space that are doing due diligence around compliance and avoiding duplicate discounts can understand the state policy. So looking forward to both of those sessions. Next slide. I think that might tie us up towards the end. And I would open it up. So are there any other questions from Rhiannon and myself? We would love to have those. And I see Felicity. She's there. Look at her. She might have made it from Las Vegas, I guess. So first of all, thank you all. Been a great conversation today. Hopefully you enjoyed a bite to eat, but also took away some nuggets of information from today's conversation. And we're really looking forward to the next meeting and any other updates that might be coming down the pipeline. As you can imagine, we're expecting several. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Felicity, for the opportunity for both Rhiannon and I to have a piece of Ladies Who Lunch and Learn. Till next time.